Still quite a bit to talk about, and I'm glad that you're with us here because we're forever running out of time, it seems. 3 hours is simply never enough. I'm not quite sure why. But I still want to talk about some of these challenges that our military is facing right now, and just in terms of preparedness. We understand that numbers are down in terms of ships and planes and all of that. But the report I heard the other night was simply frightening. So I want to get to that here before long. Right now, though, we have a guest in studio I'd like to introduce. She is Kacey Cordes. She describes herself as a modern, progressive, independent candidate for mayor in the city of St. Louis. And Kacey, welcome into the program.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
You are still actually in the middle of a little bit of a court battle with the Board of Elections to get your name on the ballot. What's going on with that? Why are they giving you so much trouble?
We are advocating that the court compel the Board of Elections to place my name on the April ballot. Unfortunately, the way that the nominating and declaration process works with the Board of Elections, there seems to be a point of confusion. So the Board of Elections, we believe, doesn't really do its job in following the letter of the law, and as a result is forcing our name off the ballot, and we need to go to court in order to reverse that. So it'll be the third time in 6 months that legal action has been taken to compel them to sort of get it right. They
don't have much time. How quickly are you expecting a decision?
Well, we're expecting, I think, to hear something back from the judge on Monday. So we'll see.
What was part of the question? Did I read an article in the Post about whether or not you were an independent candidate or a nonpartisan candidate? Was that part of the wording issue?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is an important distinction. And without putting your listeners to sleep, in an election like this, I am an independent candidate because there are other candidates that are partisan candidates. So a nonpartisan candidate runs in a nonpartisan election. This is not a nonpartisan election.
Okay.
So that's kind of the.
But they were hung up on the wording, correct?
Part of the legal argument.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck, and I hope that turns out in your favor on Monday.
Thank you.
What do you bring to the race? You obviously have not. Have you held elected office before?
I have not.
What motivated you to want to step into this one?
I think that it is incumbent upon people that have passion and intelligence and knowledge about city issues to really get involved in their local communities. And I saw a need for a progressive candidate on the April ballot. We all, of course, did not know how Tuesday's primary would turn out. And I wanted to make sure that voters in April had a choice for a progressive candidate.
So describe that for me in your words. I'm assuming you don't perceive Lyda Krewson to be a progressive Democrat?
I think that the way the primary resulted, a lot of folks are disappointed that 69% of voters voted for someone else, and unfortunately see that victory as sort of maintaining the status quo. I think people recognize that St. Louis really needs to change and move forward in so many ways, and that doing the same things we've done for the past 16 years isn't going to get us there.
You know, some people might argue doing the same things we've done for the past 60 years won't get us there. I mean, the same party has dominated this city for that long.
This is true. Yeah. I think we need new ideas, new people. I think we're already seeing a really exciting turnover of officers on the Board of Aldermen. So we have new energy there. We have people that are really asking tougher questions and digging into issues where, you know, we had a lot of people on autopilot who weren't necessarily really digging in to do what's best for the people in their neighborhoods.
So what does that mean for you then? So we know what Francis Slay's done the last few years as mayor. We know the direction the city's gone. They're consistently shelling out money for things like the Rams and maybe a Major League Soccer stadium if that gets approved on the ballot. And yet you've got serious problems with employment issues, and the North Side obviously has a lot of socioeconomic issues to deal with. Where are you coming from on that? What do you think you can do to fix it?
So the center of my platform is racial equity, and that is really a moral imperative and an economic imperative. I think people lose sight of the fact that racial inequity in this city costs us in the region, I should say, costs us on the magnitude of $14 billion in GDP every year. So the underemployment, the unemployment, the lack of education and resources for so many people of color in this city. Yes, people talk about issues of concentrated poverty and crime, but it's really an issue around how are we educating people, how are we investing in their neighborhoods, and how are we making sure that they get jobs so that they aren't in a position where, unfortunately, they're making decisions that they probably don't want to make more often than not. That's what racial equity means to me. It means understanding where we've come from as a city, how we have a long history of struggles between the races in St. Louis, but what can we do with that now so that we can heal that friction and also then give opportunity to people who've been waiting for it for decades.
Can you do that, though, in the framework of the financial situation the city finds itself in? Because it sounds to me like, coming from the conservative side of the political equation, that what you're describing is spending a whole lot of money. If you're talking about economic inequality and things like that, where does that money come from?
I think we take a hard look at what our priorities are. I think any city that can find a way to scrounge up $60 million to invest in a major sports stadium can probably find a way to scrounge up even half that to reinvest in neighborhoods that are falling apart. It is not okay to me as a citizen of this town that we are allowing gorgeous, historically critical neighborhoods where kids are growing up to just fall apart. It's not okay.
You don't support the stadium idea then?
I don't support public funding for a stadium like that in the financial condition we are currently in, no. Well, I think it would be great if we had every major league team in the city. I think that, yes, I see the economic impact of that, and I don't deny that it's a great asset for the city to have. But I say if your house is crumbling and your foundation is cracking, why go buy a Ferrari?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
See, that is, so we would agree on that completely.
Yes,
I don't understand why they want to continue throwing money at this. In my opinion, if the idea of a Major League Soccer stadium is financially sound, the investors in that team would foot the bill for it, just like the baseball stadium, in my opinion.
You would think. And I mean, I come from a world of public-private partnership where anytime a city engages with a private group to develop some sort of asset, you know, there's a give and take, and the city needs to really develop a much more robust structure to demand more out of developers. I mean, I've worked on projects across the country in this sort of vein where you see cities in California that are really progressive say, look, Mr. Developer, if you want to come in and do X, Y, and Z, I mean, that's the concept of a community benefits agreement. Here's what you're going to give us. Mm-hmm. And we don't do enough of that. We don't get, quote, the best deal for the city in many cases.
Moving forward, a lot of people talk about regional cooperation. There's a lot of talk about it, either a merger or something that would bring the city back into the county as the 91st municipality. You have thoughts on that?
I do. I think we absolutely have to move in that direction. I think it's highly inefficient to replicate so many services. There's been a ton of research that proves that we save a lot of time and money and everything if we get together and cooperate regionally. I think this fragmentation is ridiculous. At the same time, I don't think we need to rush into it, but I think we need to take concrete steps forward. I think we've seen, you know, for years, we've been held up across the country for the way we operate our zoo museum district. That sort of regional, we're talking about it now relative to sports. Why is the city footing the bill for people, you know, 100 miles from here to come to a sports event? I think there's a lot that we can do to move in that direction until we are ready to really pull the trigger on it.
So people are going to look at your candidacy and they're going to say you're in the investment banking business, correct?
Community development.
Community development side of the business. Mm-hmm. You want to be the mayor of the city of St. Louis. One of the biggest issues they face is crime. I mean, it's not as bad as it is in Chicago, but it's still an issue. Mm-hmm. Part of it has to do with gangs, I'm sure, in some neighborhoods that have kind of taken over. Is it just a matter of throwing more money at the police? What do you think needs to be done?
Absolutely not. I think crime is really, there's a short-term and long-term way to look at crime. We absolutely need to change the leadership, the morale, and the organization of the police department to better structure the way officers are resourced and paid. I mean, they need to be taken care of. We absolutely have to address that issue. And therefore, we'll see, I think, a great improvement in the way that they are able to deliver service. I mean, anybody who's in that stressful of a job, when you're underpaid and underfunded and under-resourced, it makes life really tough. But at the same time, you have to take care of the people that are out in the communities that are unfortunately committing crime. And that's a huge part of the equation. So people talk about community policing, but it's become a buzzword, and I think they're not necessarily focused on the real work that it takes to rebuild those relationships between the officers and the people in neighborhoods.
And I hear officers talk about that a lot, and they talk about proactive policing. And when I had that conversation with them, to them, that is, you're driving by an alley at 3 a.m. and you see a group of people assembled there, and you stop them and kind of see what they're up to at 3 a.m. And some people view that as harassment. So is it more of that sort of thing that needs to be done? I mean, the big issues come up here after Ferguson as to this interaction between police and citizens.
It's not interaction at the time someone suspects something's going wrong. It's interaction when everything's going right. So when you're in an environment where you can just have a cup of coffee with somebody and talk and understand, meet families and really build relationships, so that when you see a kid in an alley at 5 a.m. and you think, what's that kid doing? Guess what? You know that kid. And you're not going to assume the worst and then maybe make a decision you shouldn't be making.
Yeah, and there are a lot of barriers there that police are running into where people won't talk to them. And right. I know they've tried community policing for many years. I don't know how big of an impact they've had. We're talking to Kacey Cordes, who's going to be an independent candidate for mayor in St. Louis. All we have to do is get the election board to agree with you, right? Yes. So hopefully Monday you get a decision on that. I see an interesting scenario being set up here because, as you mentioned, there didn't seem to be a lot of passion in the vote for Lyda Krewson. She won a very close race, barely beat Tashara Jones. Now you'll have although it's been years since a Republican's been elected in St. Louis, Andrew Jones running, had him on the show. He's African-American. I don't know if that has any impact on the African-American voters in St. Louis or not, but I'm sure he's going to be talking to them about issues they have in common. And then you come into the scene as somebody who describes yourself as very progressive with a different point of view than we've seen out of the party. This could be a very interesting three-way race. Are you thinking the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think no matter what, we need to get to a point where we're advocating the best for the city. And that is my number one priority. How can we make sure that we really improve quality of life for the people who live here and take care of the city that we love?
Kacey, how can people find out more about your campaign? Is it website?
Yes, so it's the letters KC for STL.com. We're on social media and really active and gearing up for a really exciting 3 weeks.
Very good. Good. Best of luck.
Thank you.
We'll be watching Monday to see how that court situation turns out.
Me too.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Kacey Cordes there. I'll get to more of your phone calls. We're going to get to a break right now. Call us down here at 314-969-9797 or 866-455-9797. We're back in just a minute.
The Mark Cox Show on FM News Talk 97.1, 98.7, AM 1490, and 97.1talk.com.